Time travel. It's one of those things that we've all thought about at some point in time. If you had a time machine, right? Where would you go? Would you visit the future to see how the world turned out? Or maybe you'd head back in time to witness some of history's biggest moments? We went down a bit of a rabbit hole on Reddit to figure this out, and we saw what some people had to say about it. And some of the answers, well, they're pretty interesting. One person wanted to go back and watch the premiere of Star Wars in 1977, and this was just to experience the original audience reaction. A few people said they'd go back and kill Hitler. There's no surprises there. Others wanted to see what the ancient wonders were like. Let's say watching the Great Pyramid getting built, just to understand the engineering behind it. And then obviously there were the investors. Tons of people that said they'd go back and buy Apple stock or Bitcoin lottery tickets, right, to cash in on what they already knew was coming. And a few just wanted to visit their ancestors or meet long-lost relatives, which was sweet. Then there was this one guy who had a completely different idea. He wanted to go back to 1927 to the 5th Solvay conference just to be in a room of history's greatest physicists. And that last one got us thinking a bit. What if someone used a time machine to go back to 2008? This is to find Satoshi Nakamoto, to kidnap him, and burn the Bitcoin white paper. How different do you think life would look like in 2025? Do you think we'd be better or worse off? Would we finally have figured out how flying cars worked? Or maybe we'd be stuck in another third world war? And maybe crypto would exist, or maybe we'd be back in offices trading Forex and complaining about Visa's 3.5% overseas transaction fees. And that is what we'll be talking about today. My name is Bradley Peak. You're watching the Symbiosis YouTube channel. Let's dive in. So the first major question that we should approach is asking ourselves whether crypto would still be crypto without Bitcoin. Now, there are two main arguments here, and we'll explore these in detail. The first one is a kind of Bitcoin was an inevitable development. The evolution of digital currencies without Bitcoin, it sounds impossible, right? Well, not exactly. You see, Bitcoin may have been the first modern cryptocurrency, but the idea of digital money didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually the result of decades of innovation. Let's rewind to 1989 when David Chaum, a trailblazer in cryptography, founded DigiCash Inc. His vision was to create a form of electronic money that ensured user privacy through cryptographic protocols. This meant that transactions could theoretically be conducted anonymously, and this was a revolutionary concept at the time. Users would withdraw digital coins from their banks and spend them without the transactions being traceable back to them. However, the system required banks to adopt new protocols and users to install specialized software, and this all hindered widespread adoption. Additionally, operating as a centralized entity meant that users had to place their trust in DigiCash itself. Unfortunately, the company couldn't achieve the necessary critical mass and filed for bankruptcy in 1998. Now, around the time that DigiCash was struggling, eGold came about. This was established in 1996 by Dr. Douglas Jackson, an oncologist, and attorney Barry Downey. Now, eGold offered a digital currency system backed entirely by physical gold. Users could open accounts denominated in grams of gold and make instant transfers to other account holders, effectively digitizing the concept of gold ownership. At its peak, eGold experienced rapid growth, boasting millions of accounts and processing transactions worth over $2 billion annually. However, its success attracted scrutiny. The platform's irreversible transactions and user anonymity made it appealing to cyber criminals for activities like money laundering and fraud. Now, in 2007, the US authorities indicted the company and its principals for operating an unlicensed money transmitting business and one that was facilitating illegal activities. By 2009, eGold ceased operations, marking the end of one of the earliest digital currencies backed by a tangible asset. And then around the time that eGold began having troubles, Nick Szabo, the guy that you probably might have heard of, appears on the scene. And this is where things really get interesting. In 2005, Nick elaborates on an idea that he had back in the 90s, which is called BitGold. The elaboration delved into the mechanics of creating unforgeably costly bits through proof-of-work functions. Essentially, participants would generate a string of data by performing high-paced trial and error, almost identical to how Bitcoin works today. And the problem, it never became reality. But many believe that BitGold was the missing link between early digital currencies and Bitcoin itself. Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever they may be, took these ideas and ran with them. By combining cryptographic security with a peer-to-peer network and proof of work, the concept of Bitcoin was born in 2008. And here's one last twist for you. Stylometric analysis, studies of writing styles, right, show striking similarities between the works of Nick Szabo and the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto. Bitcoin and BitGold also share the same prefix, bit, right? So could Szabo actually be the mastermind behind Bitcoin? Some people think so, but it isn't the topic topic of today's discussion. So to sum up here, there is an argument to state that some kind of Bitcoin would have come along sooner or later. And before we move on to argument 2, leave a comment below to let us know what you think about this. Now, argument 2 suggests that without Bitcoin, crypto could have been delayed for decades. And some argue that the creators of Bitcoin found the missing piece of the puzzle at just the right time, when a global financial crisis was piquing interest in the concept of decentralization. Now, without that right missing piece at that time, we wouldn't just have a different version of crypto, we might not actually have it at all. Let's think about what came before Bitcoin. DigiCash, e-gold, both promising ideas, but both ultimately failed. Why? Because they were centralized, they were legally vulnerable and impossible to scale. No one had cracked the puzzle of creating a truly trustless, decentralized digital currency. Even Nick Szabo's BitGold, while definitely ahead of its time, wasn't a complete solution. It was designed more of as a digital reserve than an actual currency that people could use in everyday transactions. It lacked a decentralized consensus mechanism, meaning there was no system in place to verify transactions without relying on some form of authority, right? And that's where Bitcoin changed the game. It solved the biggest challenges that plagued digital currencies for years. Suddenly, money could move peer-to-peer without a bank, without a middleman, without trust in a single entity. It created somewhat of a blueprint, because without Bitcoin, right, where would all of your favorite altcoins be? Take Litecoin, for example, launched in 2011. It literally called itself the silver to Bitcoin's gold. It took Bitcoin's model and improved on it, making transactions faster and more efficient. Ethereum, totally different vision, right? It was built to support decentralized applications, not payments, but here's the thing. Ethereum's developers built on the success of Bitcoin to prove that a decentralized blockchain network could actually work. Even Ripple, which operates in a completely different space, it helped banks and financial institutions to move money, basically. It still benefited from the awareness and legitimacy that Bitcoin gave to the entire nascent blockchain technology, right? And then there's consensus mechanisms. This is how a blockchain secures itself and confirms transactions, right? Bitcoin's proof of work was the first real-world test of decentralized consensus. And without it, we probably wouldn't have ever explored proof of stake consensus models, or maybe experimental stuff like DAGs. I mean, maybe we would have, but the timeline would have been drastically delayed, I think. And let's not forget about security, governance, and scalability, right? Bitcoin's influence drove innovation in all of these areas. No Bitcoin? No reason to push boundaries and make blockchain networks stronger, faster, and more secure. So the question here isn't just, would crypto look different without Bitcoin? The real question is, would crypto exist at all? Because without Bitcoin paving the way, the financial world might have never taken the blockchain seriously, and the entire industry, well, it could have been stuck in limbo for decades. But what do you think about argument number 2? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments. In the next section of this discussion, we'll imagine what a world without Bitcoin would look like. Did it change the world for the better, or has it led to an ominous, chaotic alternate reality from which there's no turning back? Let's delve into these two arguments. Argument 1 is, of course, a better life without Bitcoin, and some argue that without Bitcoin, we might be a lot better off. Think about it. Bitcoin was the proof of concept for blockchain technology, and without it, would financial institutions have been so eager to explore decentralized systems? I don't think so. And without that push, investment capital might have flowed into other industries instead. Here's the key. And these are industries that were already transforming our world. Take fintech, for example. You've got mobile banking, you've got online payments and peer-to-peer lending. These are all things that were already reshaping the financial world in the early 2010s. Without Bitcoin pulling attention towards crypto, fintech could have grown even faster, giving us better, more efficient financial solutions. Then there's the whole AI game. These technologies were gaining traction in automation, language processing, and data analytics, but with more investment in AI during the 2010s specifically, we might have seen earlier breakthroughs in automation, maybe self-driving technology, or even AI-driven healthcare stuff. And what about renewable energy? This is really crucial. The 2010s were a crucial decade for climate action. If Bitcoin, often criticized for its energy consumption, wasn't in the picture, would have investors funneled more money, say, into solar, wind, and clean tech? Maybe we'd be further along in solving the energy crisis today, and maybe we might be a few degrees cooler. And let's not forget biotechnology and healthcare, right? More funding in this space could have accelerated medical breakthroughs, improving healthcare systems worldwide. And here's another angle. Tax revenue. I did a lot of work on this. Now, crypto by its very nature has made it easier for people to avoid taxes. A study in Norway, I think, found that 6% of adults had undeclared cryptocurrencies, and a staggering 88% of crypto holders didn't report their assets on tax returns. Imagine that. Without Bitcoin, governments might have collected more revenue, and that could have gone into infrastructure, healthcare, and public services. And then there's the darker side of crypto. The industry is still young, and that's made it a prime target for scams and fraud. We all know this. Billions of dollars have been lost to Ponzi schemes, as exchange collapses and hacked wallets. It's not just the individuals losing money, right? Major economies have experienced significant capital outflow. In some cases, illicit crypto transactions have even been linked to terrorism financing and weapons development. And here's a shocking statistic for you. In 2024 alone, hackers stole $2.2 billion from cryptocurrency platforms, and that is a 21% increase from the previous year's $1.8 billion. Noting that North Korean hacking groups such as Lazarus are the perpetrators behind many of these attacks, would a world without Bitcoin have been a safer, more stable place? I don't know, it's a fair argument, right? But that's just one side of the debate. What if Bitcoin had actually been a net positive for the world? We'll explore that next. So of course, argument 2 is the idea that Bitcoin was needed for global financial betterment. Hence where we flipped the script. What if Bitcoin wasn't a mistake, but one of the most transformative innovations of our time? Bitcoin didn't just create this new kind of money. I think it really changed the way that we think about finance. Before Bitcoin, financial systems were centralized. They were slow and expensive. But once Bitcoin proved that a decentralized trustless system could actually work, I think it set off this chain reaction of innovation. Take decentralized finance, or DeFi. Bitcoin laid the entire groundwork for an entire financial system that operates without banks, without middlemen, and without barriers. Today we have smart contracts, decentralized exchanges, lending platforms, and these are open to anyone with an internet connection. And it really goes beyond money too. Bitcoin's core ideas, security, transparency, decentralization, they've made their way into industries far beyond finance. For example, supply chain management. This is something that people tend to overlook. Companies now use blockchain to track products from factory to store, preventing fraud and ensuring authenticity. Then there's healthcare. Medical records can be stored on tamper-proof ledgers, giving patients more control over the data. And also, there are voting systems. Blockchain technology is now being explored for secure and transparent elections, reducing the risk of manipulation. Then there's the real-world impact of transactions in crypto. Bitcoin revolutionized how we move money. For example, now we have much lower remittance fees. Sending money across borders previously is pretty expensive, right? A $200 transfer probably can cost up to 10% in fiat fees, but with crypto, those costs drop dramatically. The speed goes up too. Traditional international bank transfers can take days, right? Maybe a week even. Now, crypto transactions can take seconds or minutes. And what about financial inclusion, right? Billions of people don't have access to bank accounts, but they do have phones. Now with crypto, they're no longer excluded from the global economy. And that's all without talking about entire economies being transformed. In 2021, El Salvador made history as the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. And guess what? Tourism boomed for one. Bitcoin enthusiasts and investors started visiting the country, boosting local businesses, and then foreign investment increased as El Salvador positioned itself as a leader in the digital economy. And of course, remittances became cheaper with the introduction of the Chivo wallet. This allows Salvadorians to send and receive money with lower fees and faster transfers. This is a real game changer for a country where remittances make up a huge chunk of the economy. In Kenya, Bitcoin is currently being used to help the unbanked gain access to financial services, proving that crypto can provide real solutions in places where traditional banking has failed. So again, let's ask this big question. Would the world be better off without Bitcoin? Without it, we might still be seeing slow, expensive, centralized financial systems, and millions of people around the world would be left without access to banking at all. But what do you think about this? So after all of that, are we better off with or without Bitcoin? Some say Bitcoin was inevitable. If it hadn't been created, something like it would eventually roll along. Others argue that crypto wouldn't exist at all without Bitcoin. It solved key problems that no other digital currency had cracked. And then there's the idea that we might be better off without it. Maybe fintech, AI, and renewable energy would have advanced faster. But on the flip side, Bitcoin has changed the world. It's made finance much more accessible to everyone, driven innovation, and even transformed entire economies like El Salvador and Kenya. So what do you think? Was Bitcoin a breakthrough or a mistake? And if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Anyway, I'm Bradley Peak, this is Symbiosis, and I'll see you in the next one.